Now, amid the raging conflict and imminent ground invasion of Gaza by Israeli forces, Iran's actions has also irked America. The White House has released a statement saying that Iran facilitated attacks through proxy groups on U.S. military bases in Iraq and in Syria. Former U.S. President Barack Obama has warned about Israel's actions like cutting off food and water for Gaza, saying it could only weaken international support for Israel. Meanwhile, China's foreign minister in a statement has said that all countries have the right to self-defense and condemned attacks on civilians in the conflict. In another big update from India, Prime Minister Modi has spoken to the King of Jordan, Abdullah II, and asserted on efforts for resolution of the humanitarian situation.
I want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, not just for your time, but because I'm lucid about the fact that this fight against terrorism is obviously a matter of existence for Israel, but it's a matter of existence for all of us. This is why we discussed together, and I just reminded this issue, but I consider that this is an international coalition in order to fight against these terrorist groups that we have to build. I just reminded my people in my language what we discussed about fight against terrorism, humanitarian action, rules to be respected, but as well political process. And obviously I warned against any escalation, and I warned Hezbollah and some other regimes not to be part of what's happening. We had a very precise discussion, and I want to thank you for that. Now we will follow up this discussion in the coming hours in order to see what we can improve in the coming days, but I'm sure in the coming weeks and months. I know how committed you are. Let me express once again my solidarity, my friendship, and the fact that France stands with you in this awful terrorist act you had to experience. We are with your people.
I don't want to speak to assessment of what they might be targeting. I'll leave it to the Pentagon to offer any assessments that they have on that question. I will say that we are concerned about an increase in attacks by Iranian proxies in the region, whether they be targeting U.S. interests or whether they be targeting other interests in the region. We hold Iran accountable for those attacks. And as the Secretary said yesterday when he was interviewed, it's something that we are preparing for and are ready to respond to if necessary.
We know that they're supporting these groups. We know they've supported Hamas and Hezbollah. We know they're monitoring these events very, very closely, and in some cases urging on some of these groups. And that's why I made it clear the President does not want to see this conflict widen. We have added additional military capability into the region to deter any such action, and we will act appropriately to protect and defend our national security interests in the region. You saw that just last week when a guided missile destroyer shot down missiles and drones that were potentially on their way into Israel. We take those responsibilities seriously, and anybody else in the region ought to be paying attention to that.
Now, there have been several solidarity visits by world leaders. Today, you had French President Emmanuel Macron visiting Tel Aviv, where he met with Israel President Isaac Herzog and expressed his solidarity. The French president also met with survivors of the Hamas attack against Israel and their family members. He also said that 30 of France's compatriots were murdered on October 7th, and 9 others still remain missing, perhaps held hostage by the Hamas.
We are bereaving with major pain that we've never suffered as a nation since our establishment, and we've suffered a lot of pain throughout our history. I see families day in, day out, or bereaving, praying, crying, emotionally suffering so much, and the entire nation is suffering with them. But we are a strong nation. And we are committed to overcome, and we are committed to destroying our enemies. We are demanding the full and immediate release of all of our citizens who are abducted and hijacked, and the immediate release, as we are seeing clear crimes against humanity. We're seeing the suffering of young and old. 30 children, Mr. President. 30 children are out there kidnapped by Hamas terrorists who carried out one of the worst atrocities in modern times. We are following very closely the situation in Lebanon. I think Hezbollah is playing with fire. I think their Iranian empire of evil that is backing them and operates day in, day out to destabilize the Middle East and the region is playing with fire. And I want to make clear, we are not looking for a confrontation in our northern border or with anyone else. We are focused on destroying Hamas infrastructure and bringing our citizens back home. But if Hezbollah will drag us into war, it should be clear that Lebanon will pay the price. Lebanon cannot be a sovereign member of the international community, its citizens carrying a Lebanese passport, when it comes to attacking Israel, they're not responsible. We don't see it that way, none whatsoever. And by international law,
let's bring in Shiv Arur once again on this broadcast. Shiv, world leaders continuing to visit Israel, French President Emmanuel Macron being the latest. How is the geopolitics really around this war playing out? Which are the countries who openly come out in support of Israel?
Now, the geopolitical situation is perhaps one of the most interesting aspects of what's happening between Israel and Hamas, because, over 18 days, there is a visible sense that pressure on Israel has built from the international community, not least from its closest ally, the United States. President Biden, with one eye on his re-election campaign next year, keen to still be seen as a stable leader, providing leadership in a fragile world, has been constantly harping on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, rightfully so, and has been pushing aid as well, so has India. But the world is divided, let's make no mistake. Geopolitically speaking, the Israel-Hamas conflict has completely divided the world. The Arab world in one way, which was on the road to a kind of semblance of normalcy with Israel, that's gone straight out of the window. Qatar put out a very strong statement earlier today as well. The French President Emmanuel Macron, who has his own domestic compulsions, huge Arab immigrant population in France, he's come calling to meet with the leadership of Israel. Apart from that, across the world, if you look at it, the messaging has been divided. India has obviously trod that middle path, which it always has as far as foreign policy is concerned. But I imagine that as the days go by, as the stakes get higher, and all of this centered around those hostages that continue to be in Hamas captivity, I think there's going to be a greater degree of pressure on many countries to start taking sides. It's no longer going to be, possible to simply navigate this by walking a tightrope diplomatically or otherwise, and therefore I think it's going to be a difficult and interesting time ahead.